When we began researching the paranormal, we crossed a bridge into the weird and we found ourselves wanting to believe. We studied the stories and legends and we wanted our own personal experiences with these ghosts. Selfish and short-sighted, a narrow focus on finding what we knew was out there. We had amassed many of the tools of the trade and even built some of our own. We had all the pieces to put the puzzle together. All that was left to do was assemble it. Make the pieces fit until the final image was revealed. The bias was real. The Mexico Trestle is a steel stringer bridge with timber pilings that passes over Audrain County Road 913 and also a tributary of the South Fork of the Salt River. This unused Kansas City Southern Railway bridge was formerly part of the Illinois Central Gulf Rail Line and appears on maps as far back as 1887. The trestle is located just outside of Mexico, Missouri, and the road beneath it takes a tight curve as it winds between the timbers. Surrounded by woods, the old gravel road was very lightly traveled each time we went. Most of the ghost stories surrounding the Mexico Trestles involve the ghosts of hanged African Americans, either slaves or victims of the Ku Klux Klan. One interpretation of the legend is that you can see footprints on your car if you park underneath the bridge. Presumably, the ghost footprints of the hanging victims dangling from the bridge. Others report eyes staring at them from the woods and from atop the bridge. Orbs and unexplained lights have also been seen out here. While we were investigating the Mexico Trestles, we couldn't help but notice the broken pieces of something ceramic with a message written on it. Was this some kind of paranormal mystery waiting to be unraveled? The pieces of a shattered message left atop the haunted bridge for us to decipher? Another spooky legend from around Mexico is that of the Haunted Hill. The Haunted Hill made the newspaper on multiple occasions in the 1800s, famous for its ghosts that would shriek and holler throughout the night, spook lights that menaced passers-by, and even its own Dead Man's Curve on the road out to the hill. Although a much older case of hauntings, tales from the Haunted Hill show evidence of a long history of ghost stories set on the backroads around Audrain County. The overall treatment of African American slaves in our country's history lends itself to the idea that many slaves were killed and no one aside from their slave owner ever knew. With that being said, when we dug into the research on this bridge, it quickly became evident that there was no record of anyone being hanged, executed, lynched, or killed at this particular crossing. That is not to say that it absolutely did not happen, just that it was not recorded or reported later. According to a 1953 newspaper report in the Mexico Ledger, no lynchings were ever recorded in the history of Audrain County. The same article reports that only 3 people had ever been hanged in the county, all 3 executed legally after being found guilty for murder. It should be noted that 2 of the hanged were African American and likely did not see a fair trial. All 3 men were hanged from a scaffold erected specifically for their execution. And where was this scaffold? Well, it was in the woods just east of the railroad bridge. However, it was not the Mexico Trestle Bridge, but the bridges east of town that cross over the Salt River and what is now Highway 54. This seems like prime source material for the legend. Although details and the setting have been changed, it does account for hanged African Americans near bridges in the woods. It seems that these legends have changed and adapted over time to fit the storyteller and their interpretation of what their listeners fear. Plus, it's no doubt harder to find a random pile of wood, like a rotten old gallows, and designate that haunted than it is to convince people that the creepy old Trestle Bridge outside of town is the real haunted place. In December of 2017, the road out to the trestle was the site of a very real and very horrific unsolved murder. Just around noon on the 12th of December, Antonio Jefferson was found fighting for his life in the middle of Audrain County Road 913. Antonio was covered in blood. A knife was found near his body. His car was on fire and crashed into a nearby tree. Life-saving efforts were made, but unfortunately it was too late. The 19-year-old Jefferson was pronounced dead when he arrived at the hospital. Upon investigation, many strange details emerged. The knife found near Jefferson, and evidently the murder weapon, was purchased by Antonio in the hours leading up to his death. On a closer look, Jefferson's car appeared to have only slowly crashed into the tree, and the fire seemed deliberately set after the fact, not caused by the wreck. Some kind of staging to make it look like Jefferson had crashed into the tree. The confusing details made it difficult to determine what actually occurred at the scene, and just how Jefferson met his demise. While not directly tied to it, this tragic event, in the direct vicinity of the bridge, is sure to add to the legends surrounding the Mexico Trestles, and it certainly confirms that this area does have a very real and very dark history. The mysterious death of Antonio Jefferson remains unsolved. Anyone with additional information is asked to call the Audrain County Sheriff's Office Investigations Unit at 573-473-5801. We made 4 trips to the Mexico Trestles for this research project. Day, night, and day into night. We explored the area around the bridge and walked the decommissioned tracks in each direction. There's another trestle bridge half a mile down the tracks that is in much better condition, likely because it's not a public crossing, and instead, just a creek in the woods that the railway passes over. This place is double dark at night. Before your eyes adjust to the darkness, you'll be lucky to see the bridge just 30 feet away from you. Our first trip to the Trestles was our first attempt at an actual contact session using the SB7 and some experimental controls. We prepared questions in advance and attempted to record the session using an SB7 spirit box being played aloud and an audio recorder to track the questions we asked. We encountered several technical difficulties. We were short on cameras and camera batteries, and so we were unable to video record the session. After reviewing the data from this contact session, we became aware of the many biases that conflict with gathering verifiable data using an SB7. The first being a context bias. The experimenters are aware of the stories surrounding the locations they investigate, and therefore, they're more likely to hear or fill in words with related context while listening to the SB7 live. People's interpretations of what they hear coming through a spirit box often align or are made to align with previously known details from the story or location that they are investigating. Vague responses that require interpretation before they are considered profound. Second is a groupthink bias. The first or most firmly delivered interpretation of what word or phrase is heard on the SB7 while listening live is typically the most accepted response. Something else we noticed about the SB7? is that it uses radio messages to generate possible communication or a response from ghosts or spirits. Spirits that often seem to be talking directly to those conducting an experiment. The nature of radio messages, especially clearly enunciated advertisements, is to be talking to the listener. To address these SB7 biases, we devised a new technique for using the SB7 that reduces situational bias and allows for independent blind and double-blind review. The following is the method. Using the output jack on the SB7, record the signal directly into an audio recorder so that it is not heard in real time. Separately, record audio of the questions being asked. The separate recordings can then be aligned and/or isolated for review. An independent reviewer can listen to the isolated SB7 recording, allowing them to be free of contextual information that would otherwise be provided by hearing the questions or through knowing information about the location or investigation. This independent review can then be correlated with the questions asked to look for anomalous and/or potentially intelligent responses coming through the SB7. Throughout our investigations at the Mexico Trestles, we also became cognizant of the issues involved with investigating in a public place. First, people driving their cars directly past the investigation area can cause issues with data collection. Curious people are likely to stop and ask questions. And also, public places that are allegedly haunted are hotspots for delinquent behavior and vandalism. Hauntings and ghost encounters seem to be a personal experience, unique to the experiencer. So, why leave it to us to force our interpretations of the evidence? We've provided links in the description to our investigation reports, transcripts, and audio files of each contact session. For those interested, you can review the questions we asked, the words that our word generator application produced, and scan for any potential audio anomalies in the review. This is our attempt to make the investigation data interactive, open-sourced, and available for independent review. Please give us feedback if you interact with the data. Let us know what we can do to make the experience better, or how we can more effectively present the research. We wanted to believe. We still do. But after we began reviewing our data and researching what these tools really were, things changed. The fog of mystery began to clear, and we found ourselves at a new pass. Then we went out and investigated each one of these bridges and began to apply critical thinking. The haunted glass house began to crumble. We found biases and technical difficulties in nearly every piece of ghost hunting equipment that we used. These devices didn't help us find ghosts, but they did help us cross the bridge from the island of devout believers to the land of critical thinkers. In the end, we realized that you can't force the pieces of a puzzle to fit how you want them, and that sometimes the puzzle in pieces and the journey to find their proper order is just as exciting as the whole picture when assembled. Enjoy the journey and embrace the personal experience. Thrive in the research, and you'll always have a friend in the paranormal, in the quest to explain the unexplained.